everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today is the last video of this little series I've done to complete this entire table. And in the last video, if you didn't see, I did a rock and stony wall platform for the corner. It's got a flat top where I will be kind of extending that theme out onto the other pieces. So I have the XPF foam. I'm going to piece that together, and then it's going to flow into this white packaging foam. And as you can see, I already have another platform that I'll just sit on top of that. All right, so starting with the XPF foam, what I'm going to do is where this cutout is, where the rock and the stony wall is, I'm going to extend that stone wall down into the bottom just so it kind of flows into that stony and rocky hill in the platform. So what I'm going to do is just start carving those stony walls. Same concept as the last video. If you didn't see, you should check it out. Basically, I am just going to take a colored pencil or any kind of pencil and just kind of carve into the XPF foam. And I'm not measuring it, not really doing anything. I just want two little brick layers or stone layers that is going to be on the ground. And I'm going to have that flow around, so it's not just one-sided, it's going to be on both sides of the cutout that you see. And as always, it does not have to be perfect. I do not measure, my lines are not straight, and I just think, especially in a Halloween town, it makes it a lot spookier. So I am not caring about perfection with those. But I'm just going to extend, so, and then once I go around the curve, I will kind of curve those stony wall layers, so that way it kind of flows really nicely going on to the second side. Alright, so now that that's done, I'm going to ball up a piece of aluminum foil and just really kind of mash down onto those stony walls, just because it adds more texture and it adds more details, and those elements are really gonna come through when I paint it. Alright, so for the most frustrating part of this whole adventure that I've been on, um, this has been the most frustrating because I could not get these two pieces of XPF foam together very nicely and tightly to save my life. So I ended up doing the best I could, and I kind of left it there because I didn't have enough time to go back through and to kind of figure out more options of putting these two pieces together. But what I did was took these wooden sticks. I used them in my wreath um, projects that I do, and so they're kind of, I don't know exactly what they're called, but they're just wooden picks. I thought by hot gluing each end and then putting it through the XPF foam, that it would join nicely and tightly and it would be secure. And I feel like in the end it was secure. It just wasn't, it didn't go the best. And then I was fighting with my hot glue gun. So it was a lot of fun to deal with this part. So you will see me struggle. I don't know. There's probably a lot better ways. I will figure out better next time. I grabbed a mallet and everything. It was really frustrating. But in the end, they did kind of join together, and I was like, okay, my initial thing was just to paint across it, but because I had that width and I had that line, which you'll see in a few minutes, then I ended up just putting a mat over it, the Lamax moss mat, and it did fine because as despite the little gap that you'll see, it ended up being even. So even now, I actually have my town together and there's no pieces wobbling or anything. So either way, it still worked. It just didn't work the best. So this is what I mean when talking about the gap. But hey, it was together. I ended up putting some of those wooden sticks diagonally into the foam to kind of secure it just a little bit more. And it's together and it's not extra wobbly or anything else. It's just not what I had envisioned. But we're going to move on to the paint. So as before, I have the black base paint, and that's gonna mostly go over the stony walls, and the rest I'm gonna use the same color concepts as before with the stony walls with 3 different grays, and I'm going to use the same browns. They're about 2 different browns with a green. I don't think I highlighted that, but it's in the previous video if y'all have seen the other 2 videos. Then, as I said before, I'm going to be using that Lamax Moss matte just to cover that gap of the platform. So starting off with this black paint, I'm going to paint the stony walls. I'm also going to paint where the grass and the dirt is going to be. I kind of like having that black base paint underneath that. I feel like it darkens it just a little bit, which I like better than just the greens that I use are very bright green, and I like for them to be a little bit more darker. Anyways, that's why I use that. I'm going to kind of paint that closer to the crease because that's going to end up being covered either way. So now I'm going to start just painting on the stony bricks on the ground. And if you haven't seen my last video where I did the stony wall and the rocks, please go check it out because I really go in details with what colors to use and how I painted it, and you just want to be very careful with some of the colors. So with the first color, I'm going to use a dark gray. That's going to be my base, my second base paint basically for the stony bricks walls, and you want to kind of get a good coverage with that. I just don't want to go in the creases where the black is. I want to leave that alone because that black really pops through and really adds that detail for the bricks. And then I will go in with a second gray. That's going to be kind of a highlighting gray where I'm going to put a decent amount, but I still want to make sure I take the paintbrush and I dab it onto, dab it into the paint, then kind of dab it somewhere else where you take kind of the excess paint off of. That way you can put a nice thinner layer of paint. And then I'm going to go in with a light gray, which is a very light kind of a white gray. And I really sparingly just kind of want to brush that on just very, very lightly because that just kind of adds more pop into those details and everything that I created when putting the aluminum foil and dabbing that on. All right, now for a coffee break. With my Chucky. I mean, come on, it's Halloween, right? All right. So, anyways, even though I had that coffee in the morning, I kept forgetting to cut my camera on when I started painting. But what you want to do is you want to add the green first. That's what I'm going to do first. And then I'm going to go through second with my darker browns and then my lighter browns. So I want to kind of put the greens on the outside. That way, then the browns kind of go into the middle. Same theme that I've always done before with my previous platforms. I kept it the same way because I want it to be really even throughout my entire village. Even on my other table, this is how I painted my other platforms, which is why I'm doing it the same here. So now I'm going to put my dark brown and then my light browns. So I'm going to put the dark browns closer to the green area, which is like, a grassy area. And then on the where the gap is, where I have my light brown, I put only light brown there because that's going to be covered by a Lamax matte. And the only reason why I wanted to paint underneath there is because over time that moss mat is going to flake off. Eventually I will replace them or just create a new platform, but until then, sometimes with those flakes they flake off. I don't want the bottom to be see-through and you see the purple coming through, if that makes sense. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and just paint that just a light color, which kind of almost matched the matte, so that was great. But now that I got all the base colors on there, I'm going to just start blending all the colors together. I'm going to kind of be careful when I go near the stony walls just because I don't want to color the rocks that I've already colored. And, just really this is more of a preference. How much do you want yours to be blended? I always blend my colors, then go back through and add more color in spots where I'm like, oh, this area is too light. Let me add a little bit more dark brown. Oh, I want a little bit more green here. Let me just add a couple of green spots. So it's really to your preference at this point. I always end up going back and just adding a couple of drops of paint left over. And one tip that I found useful is every time I'm blending the colors, sometimes because I do just directly put the paint onto the platform, I sometimes have too much paint, which is okay because what I'll do is I'll just take a paper towel and I'll just like start blending and then kind of dab my paintbrush on the paper towel and start blending some more. That way it kind of wipes the excess paint off and it helps. I think it helps me get a better blend, but I'm not a painter, so that's just what I found the past couple times I've been doing, the platforms and painting them. Okay, so that is what everything looks like blended in together. Now I'm gonna use this technique I found a couple of times ago, and I'm gonna take a paper towel and I'm just going to dab all around the platform just because I feel like instead of having paintbrush strokes, you have more of a texture to it, more like a ground does. I like how it ends up looking, so this is what I'm going to use to add texture to the paint. All right, so that's gonna be it for this piece of platform. I'm gonna set it aside and let it dry. And then once I'm done, I am gonna come back through and I'm going to add the moss mat. And then I'm also gonna add other pieces of moss from Ashlands of Michaels that I have used throughout my entire platform, as well as on the other table. Again, I'm trying to have kind of like a flow of my village. So I'm just gonna cut this moss mat to kind of how I like it, definitely going to cover up that gap. And I'm going to just hot glue this on there. Now that I got my moss mat glued, I'm gonna add those extra moss pieces and kind of fill in some areas where, I like to do the corners just because it gives a nice little flow with the platform, like kind of where it ends and begins. And I'm gonna cover up that gap in the front and gonna have it kind of trickle down also to of the platform. And yeah, I mean, this is again like kind of your preference. I don't like to add super amount of moss, but I definitely like to have some on there where it's a nice flow across the whole platform. So this is what it looks like when it's complete and when it's next to the rocky and stony wall. You can tell that stony wall goes in nicely down to the bottom and kind of flows into the bottom of the platform. So I like how it kind of continued that look throughout because I think it connects those pieces really well together. And then even with the moss mat, it goes really good and you can't see that gap. So on to the last chunk of the platform to complete this table. Now, this was a packaging foam, and I'm going to start off with creating the stairs first. And don't laugh at me, but I kind of forgot how to make stairs at this point, and I was like, "Wait, how do I do this again?" I've made them before, but I guess because I created them over a year ago, completely forgot how to do it, but I quickly figured it out. It was pretty simple because it's just literally 2 steps, so it's not that hard, but I just kinda take my pocket knife and I kinda cut down on the edges, and when I'm creating this step, I just wanna make sure I'm not going all the way down to the bottom. So, when I'm completing the first step, I kinda wanna take my pocket knife and dig halfway through that piece, as you can see. And then what I'm gonna do is just kind of make sure it's nice and neat, not perfecting it. And with this type of packaging foam, it is a bubbly package foam, so you get the little balls of foam that's compressed together, and it makes it hard sometimes to cut and sometimes to engrave things in. So that's just a downside with using this, but I had it from a package and I didn't have to go buy more XPF foam, so I used what I had and it ended up looking really good. But so again, I'm gonna create another stair on the other side, and what this is gonna do is kind of have like this little walkway in front and have stairs going up. And then I had the previous platform that had 2 more stairs, so it's gonna look really good when it's done. So for the stairs, I'm just going to kind of neaten up the stairs a little bit. I'm going to kind of go through and roughen it up a little bit, kind of make it look more rocky because stairs are going to be kind of stony as well. So I'm going to go through, notch the sides in a little bit and just kind of roughen it up, adding some of that detail to it. So this walkway in front is going to be similar to the stony walls. Yes, I'm not done with the stony walls yet. Or the stony bricks that's on the ground. That's exactly what I'm gonna do for this. Because even though that this piece of the platform is a little bit further away from the rocks and the stones, it's still gonna blend in really nicely to the whole theme. So I'm going to start by taking a colored pencil. That's what I started out with, but again, because of the foam, texture, and type, it was really hard for me to kind of get a really good, not necessarily super clean line, but I just felt like it wasn't doing much. So I ended up just taking my pocket knife, because y'all know how much I love it, and I just ended up carving that and carving the stones into that using the pocket knife just because it was able to cut a little bit deeper and I was able to get a little bit better lines with it. So that's what I'm going to use throughout this piece. And this is what it looks like when it's done after I carved. I was not planning on taking those brick layers on both sides of the platform, but when I was looking at the piece of foam, it kind of just it felt right. I felt like I needed to because the how it was designed, I felt like it would have been awkward to paint it like grassy and sandy, and I was like, "You know what? Let me just extend it across and it will give a good uniform look." All right, so now on to the painting. I ended up using the black base paint. I'm going to be using the same colors for the stones, and I'm going to be using the same colors for the top. So with the black base paint, I was running low, and I actually had to borrow some of my dad's to be able to finish the at least the stone and the wall part. So when it came to the top, I did not paint that black. I could have, but it still ended up good. So I wasn't really worried about that. Now, with painting the base layer, I want to make sure this black really gets into all of the areas where I carved into. So I'm going to want to use a really small paintbrush, and that's going to allow me to get that paint really in there, make sure it is very, like, really covered, and to where you don't have any of white specks popping through and showing through. So this is kinda how it looks when you use a smaller paintbrush. It really gets in there, and it's a little tedious, yes, but once it's done like this, it looks really good. So now I'm gonna be ready for the next 3 paints of the grays. Alright, so I went ahead and painted it, and this is what it looks like when it's done. You can use the same process that I used the last time on that other platform, same technique, and this is what it looks like when that's done. So now I'm going to go in with the top and going to use green on the outsides with that dark brown, light brown in the middle, and using that same technique again. All right, so I hate to sound like a broken record, but because of the foam, it was a little bit harder to paint. But what I did was just I had to add more paint than what I usually do. I had to kind of even put some like on the paintbrush and kind of dab it on to really make sure that it was getting in those smaller creases, as you can see. And I even had to go through sometimes with a smaller paintbrush. Um, so it's annoying, but it's still paintable. I still was able to get all the paint on there and have it looking really good when it was done. So now I'm going to go through with the brown, and then I'm going to use the light brown, and then I'm going to blend all the colors. I'm going to mostly dab all the paint on, and especially when I'm blending. So therefore I didn't have to take the paper towel trick to add more texture. The texture was already there with the type of foam that it is. So I did not do that. But I did end up going through as well and adding some moss to it from the Ashland's moss and putting some pieces on there. So this is what it looks like when it's all complete. You can tell it looks really good for it to be that, that type of foam. I always get nervous when working with it, but then when it's done, I'm like, well, that doesn't look too bad. And it looks actually pretty good. And this is what the whole platform looks like together. Now, again, I started all this from scratch. If you haven't watched my other 2 previous videos, please go and watch. I go over how I planned it, what my vision was, how I made the rocky and stony hill area, and then how, of course, this video of how I made it, the rest of it. But it came out really well, and I'm excited to add this table to my village. So if you haven't, please subscribe to this channel to see more videos on my Halloween town. The next video I'm going to go through and I will show you what it looks like with the whole town being up. Thanks guys. Bye.